So Extinction Rebellion, a global climate change movement, will today embark on a non-violent action at Standard Bank. And this is to force the bank to stop their investment in fossil fuels and demand for their investment in renewable energy into low-income communities that are disproportionately affected by energy poverty. The non-violent action will take place as the bank is hosting the annual general meeting in Rosebank. SABC News reporter Nozintombi Miya is joining us live for more. Nozintombi, a good morning to you. A very interesting conversation here as well, where just earlier today we saw the Deputy President of the country, Paul Mashadile, really speaking to investors as well that are talking about investing in sustainability, where pension funds are occurring, where pension funds are involved rather. And now on the sidelines of this protest, tell us about it.
Well, all right. Thank you so much, Naledi. While you are a bit faint to hear, we are here standing outside the Standard Bank offices in Rosebank, where about 500 protesters, and I'm going to ask my camera colleague, Swoon Ngadani, to just pan and sort of give you an idea of where we are and where we are standing. I mean, this is quite unusual. This is not quite something that you see every single day outside the Rosebank offices of Standard Bank. But there's about 500 social justice members here who are here to try and highlight the issue about the East Africa crude oil pipeline that's in between Uganda and Tanzania, and Standard Bank's involvement with that ECOP for short. And we have with us here Extinction Rebellion's campaign coordinator Malik Dasu, who was here early in the morning, from as early as about 6 o'clock, planning how they are going to get Standard Bank's attention to try and highlight their issue about why they are so unhappy and have taken umbrage with the fact that Standard Bank is involved with the East Africa crude oil pipeline. Thank you so much, Malik. You were here from 6 o'clock in the morning. Tell me, why were you here at 6 o'clock and what happened?
So we're a civil disobedience group, right? We break the law to get our message across because other forms of protesting don't work. And I've been here for 3 years now and we haven't gotten responses. This is a response. We came here at 6 o'clock so that we could get into the building. Security hadn't set up yet and they weren't checking for admission. We did that to basically get a small group in and occupy that main entrance of the AGM to stop people from going in.
How far did you get in?
So we blocked the entrance. We managed to do it, held it for about 30-45 minutes until security dragged us out.
We saw you physically being dragged out by police. Both your arms and your legs were held up by I think there were about 4 or 5 police officers or security personnel dragging you out. Do you think that helps with the aims of Extinction Rebellion, trying to get more attention to this issue about the East Africa crude oil pipeline situation?
That's how history happens. That's how change is made, right? Is you take the implicit violence of these institutions and you make it explicit. You show what they're actually capable of. And I want to make it clear, it's not just East African crude oil pipeline. Standard Bank is financing Cabo Delgado's gas production. They're financing Tendela coal, which was the reason why Fikile Nchengaze was killed. There are thousands of people being killed in Mozambique today because of Standard Bank's financing. So that's what we're here to call light to. They need to end their fossil fuel investments. They need to take a hit and record a loss on the existing loans. And they need to finance community-owned renewables, finance for poor communities in this country.
I mean, we're seeing that tentatively here with South Africa around the seismic surveys that's happening, as well as the powership issue that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of South African-owned banks involved in those issues. But for an ordinary South African that doesn't quite understand what the East Africa crude oil pipeline is, what is it and why is it so important to try and stop big banks funding organizations, petroleum organizations, trying to get involved in that?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying it's one, important because it diverts money from where it needs to go. We've got 5 community groups with us today who talk about women being raped and murdered because they're walking in dark streets at night, because they can't give care to their people because their medical devices require electricity, houses being burned down because of power surges when load shedding comes back. So that's the first thing, right? Standard Bank puts 120 billion rand into fossil fuels every year. We only need about 475 billion rand for renewable energy in this country to transition the whole country. Standard Bank by themselves can provide almost a quarter of that. That's crazy. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is that the existing abuses happening right now are they're unforgivable, right? Standard Bank is removing, well, through ECOP, 100,000 people being displaced from their lands, countless biodiversity areas and corridors being destroyed because of the pipeline being built, a climate crisis where 375,000 tons of CO2 are going to be pumped into the atmosphere when the scientists are telling me we can't put any more. Billions of people will die because of climate change, and Standard Bank make a choice to be involved in that or not.
You know, Standard Bank, as a South African-owned company, has been criticized by some of the environmentalists, both in Uganda and in Uganda and Tanzania, and I know as well as Kenya, around the human rights abuses that have come about along that pipeline, where some of the community members are saying that they have forcefully been removed from those pipelines, women raped by the militants that are sent in to remove those community members there. What has Standard Bank said in response to this?
Sure. Basically, they say three things. One is that they're creating economic growth. It's nonsense, right? Economic growth is just how you define it. That economic growth happens for wealthy clients. It happens for the governments that receive a lot of that finance. It doesn't translate to the communities. Then Standard Bank will say, well, we're creating jobs. They ignore the bigger picture. Those jobs that are created are transient, right? They provide jobs for highly skilled people, and for the low skilled people from the communities or the frontline communities, they are employed for a few months and then they've got nothing. They've got nothing to show for it. Those benefits don't translate to the ground. The third thing is that they'll say they're providing energy. Right?
An alternative. Isn't it important, though, Malik, sorry to interrupt you, in a country such as South Africa, isn't it important to try and ensure that we get some form of sustainable alternative form of energy, because the energy that we're getting now is so disruptive?
Yeah, 100%. But it's a choice about what kind of energy you invest in, right? Standard Bank can invest in renewable energy. There's nothing that commits them to financing fossil fuels. Also, just a point, ECOP is taking oil from Uganda to the port of Tanzania for export. That energy is not being used in Africa. That's a really critical point that Standard Bank choose not to.
To interrupt you a little bit more again, you talk about renewable energy such as solar, such as wind, such as hydro, but how sustainable is that in a country such as South Africa, where we can barely get it going with basic fossil fuels such as the coal that we have? Realistically, it is a large investment. We barely have enough money. It's almost like you're asking for a pie in the sky alternative to getting solar, to getting hydro. Do you really think that is something that will be a legitimate, sustainable alternative in a country such as South Africa?
Yeah. Invest in generation capacity, invest in distribution.
Where will government get that money?
They don't need it. The government doesn't need that money directly, right? That's where the private sector comes in. That's what we're calling on Standard Bank to do. That 120 billion rand that every year that they're providing for fossil fuels, that can be directed elsewhere. There's nothing that holds them to that. They can choose. It's a choice, and they choose to invest it in fossil fuels.
Thanks so much, Malik Dasu. We're going to leave it there. Naledi, the East Africa crude oil pipeline is a proposed close to 1,500 kilometer pipeline that stretches from one side of Uganda all the way through Tanzania. And this is basically an oil pipeline that private companies are trying to get going to ensure that there is gas inside that pipeline as an alternative source of energy, and not just to rely on coal, not just to rely on what Malik said, alternative renewable energy such as solar, such as hydro, such as wind power. It is a very debatable question. It is a hotly contested question, especially in a country such as South Africa that is grappling with an energy crisis, around looking at alternatives, around around looking at how those alternatives to trying to generate electricity and energy impact not just the environment but the communities around that, and how much the capital will be, whether it's a government issue or it's a public-private partnership issue. And these are the issues that these community members here outside the Standard Bank in Rosebank are trying to highlight, and they are saying that they're hoping for more alternatives to come about, and Standard Bank is saying that it is their money and their funding to try and find alternative ways of how to source electricity.